Hi, I'm Nancy Reynolds, Stampin' with Nutsy. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Bellingham, Washington. You can find my blog at stampinwithnutsy.blogspot.com. I'm also on Facebook as Stampin' with Nutsy. And welcome to our Bundle Focus program. I wanted to show you the bundle I'm using. This is our card, but I am using the Honeybee Home Bundle. I'm going to use the flower stem, one of the bees, and the 2 sentiments, You Are the Nicest and Stay Wonderful. And I am using the Heart and Home Designer Series paper. I think this is just such a beautiful set. We're going to use the flower stems with the colors. I'm choosing to use Evening Evergreen and Pale Papaya. And so let's get started. First of all, I thought we would do the envelope first because I wanted to decorate the envelope and show you how I did the coloring, both on the envelope and the piece I cut out. I have one cut out for us for our card. We'll put it up there. The first thing we want to do is get our Memento Tuxedo Black ink out and ink up our stamp. So there's our flower stem. Give it a good inking. Put the top back on and store it upside down so the ink is always at the top. And I'm going to stamp my stem right here on the side of my envelope. And then I'm going to color it in. So what I used was my Pale Papaya, the light and dark blends. The Memento ink is what we use with our alcohol blend pens. And I am just going to take my darker ink onto the flowers and add just a little bit of highlights, mostly following the lines that are already on here by an artist. So here we are. Doesn't take long at all just to make those little highlights. There we are, our highlights are done. Whoops. And I did choose, because they're smaller images, I'm choosing to use the pen end instead of the brush tip. Oh, here's what I forgot to tell you and what I forgot to do. Alcohol and blends bleed. So you really do want to have a piece of scratch paper tucked into that corner so it doesn't bleed through. This is what I mean. You can see the alcohol blends on the back of the flower stem. And I'm pressing pretty lightly and not getting a lot of ink down. So I might not really need that this time, but it's always good when you're using the alcohol blends to make sure there's something absorbent behind them, just in case. Another thing when I'm doing my blends is I always have my color lifter handy because sometimes I will color outside of the lines or something will look, I'll start to think, oh, that's a flower, and no, that's a leaf, and I need to take some color off. It doesn't actually lift the color up, but the color lifter, it actually pushes the color through to the other side. So again, you really do need to have that little piece of paper, scratch paper, to absorb it. My other color I said I was using is the Evening Evergreen. I'm not using the dark one. I didn't want that much green. But I'm just going to kind of color in the leaves that are open. I would say it was more of the line art look. And that is all I'm coloring on the leaves. I did try one coloring the stem and all of the others, and it was just too much. I like a little bit simple. And then here is one of my favorite embellishments. It's the Wink of Stella. And I am going to go over all those flower buds and make them sparkle. Because after all, You can't have too much sparkle. And this way, when it goes through the mail, the Postal Service can also enjoy the sparkle. I have thought for a long time now that we have a pretty outside. We decorate the inside of our cards. We need to have a pretty envelope. And that just takes that envelope up a notch. So our envelope is ready. Let's get to our card. It's really, normally I like a very narrow edge border on all of my card, but I thought that this looked really good with a wider edge around for the card base showing. So the card base is, let me open it up. The card base is 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches, folded in half at 4 1/4. So either A2 or A4, it's a half sheet of cardstock folded in the, what I would call the hamburger way, instead of folding at the top, which would be a hot dog. A little longer and thinner. Our first layer, so here's our card base. Putting all of my little bits and pieces aside. I'm going to set that aside for right now. Now, the front is 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches, or 9.5 times 13.9 centimeters. Layer 2 is our designer series paper, which is just a little smaller because I kept that small border, that narrow border, for this layer. And that is 3 5/8 inch by 4 7/8 inch. And we're just going to put those together with a little bit of seal. Oops. With seal, remember, you need to have your adhesive break at the top. Otherwise, you're continually rolling it with your finger and getting glue on yourself. And I try to avoid that. So one of the ways to avoid that is to lift it up at about a 90-degree angle and then pull straight up. I sometimes forget that, but here we go. It's cut in proportion, so if you line up the top and the two sides, the bottom will take care of itself. I'm now going to pull in my silicone mat, which is really wonderful for because no glue adheres to it. You could use hot glue, you could use seal, you can use multi-purpose glue, and it doesn't stick permanently to this silicone. So the silicone mat is good to have. So what I do is on the back, I run 2 lines of seal down it. I can turn it over for a quick measurement. I'm going to grab my Evening Evergreen open weave ribbon, cut myself a couple of pieces using my ribbon scissors, and I do think you need to have a pair of snips dedicated to ribbon, because when you're cutting paper, it dulls your scissors. So I have a little ribbon around my snips that I use for ribbon, and about 90% of the time I remember that those means that they're ribbon scissors, and I don't use them on paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this and wrap my ribbon around and try to get it straight and hook it on those strips of adhesive that I've got. And on this one, I'm doing 2 rows of ribbon, just for interest. If you find that you think and you're not quite comfortable with where one of your ribbons is lying, you can get under this ribbon and lift it up. The seal gives you just a moment to do that. And I was thinking that this was just off a little bit. There we are. Hold it down, put it back. There we go. There's our ribbon. We're going to build up our front piece and with the focal image before we adhere it to our card. And so I'm taking that ribbon aside. I thought that this was a really cool cinnamon cider. And that's what our card base is. I didn't tell you that. It's cinnamon cider. A very cool doily. And so I'm just going to turn this over, grab my dimensionals, and put 4 or 5 of them on. Probably, I'm going to put one here in the middle. That's probably not really necessary, but this will keep it from sinking down. I've got the ends. There we are. One thing you want to do when you're looking at the doilies is make sure all the little chads are out. I found a couple with them in. I'm just going to line this up, put it down. I have 2 pieces that I cut from the dies. And again, the set that I'm using is a bundle. So it's the Honeybee Home, but it also comes with the Honeybee Blooms dies. And I used the little grass. I cut it out twice, turned one front to back over because I would like to have it like this, kind of mirroring each other with my flower up the middle. And to adhere this, you could use the adhesive sheets. They're really nice. You put it on your paper before you cut it out, and then it makes it into like a sticker. But I didn't want it totally stuck down. I like to have things a little loose, especially on the edges. And just a few drops in strategic spots will hold it down. You do want to make sure that it gets a good adhesion. So you're going to hold it for a couple of moments. It doesn't take long to actually get it to stay down. And I'm going to do the same with the other side. This would be the perfect time if you wanted to put a little wink of Stella on your leaves. But I decided that this time I could just leave them as they are at the evening evergreen. I'm going to put, I don't know if you can tell, but I've already put Wink of Stella on my die cut piece with this flower stalk. So it is nice and shiny. And I'm just going to put a couple, I don't know, hope you can see that, a couple dimensionals in the larger spots. You could also use smaller dimensionals. We've got the little ones. You could use those. I just used the regular side mini dimensionals. Here we are. And this is almost the front of our card, except for the sentiment and the ribbon, because really, it needs a bow. It's got ribbon, it should have a bow. So I have tied a bow. I'm going to take it, I put it on a glue dot, and I'm just going to put it on my flower stem. And although the Honeybee Home, the doily is part of the suite that goes with the bundle, so it's available for sale. The bumblebees don't go with Honeybee Home, but with a name like Honeybee Home, how could you not use bumblebees? So our bumblebee trinkets can be found in the annual catalog. They just seemed appropriate. So here we are with bumblebees flying around the flower. And you can, it's most pleasing to the eye if you have 3 or 5, have an odd number. So there's our bumblebees. And here's our card front. So I am just going to take a little bit of seal and fill in spots that don't have, going over the ribbon a little bit. A little extra adhesion doesn't hurt. I'll put this on my card now, centering top and sides, and the bottom will take care of itself. What I found when I did the cutoff for my evening evergreen, making a smaller size, is I had a strip of evening evergreen. And often when I cut my white cardstock, I have strips. This is, let me see. Let's see. This is just a little over 1/2 inch long, or wide, not long, wide. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp my sentiment, which is "You're the nicest," onto my white using evening evergreen ink. Looks like I got a little much on one side. So where is my scratch paper? I have a little strip of, I was cutting down some, nope, that looks fine. Okay, here we go. I like to try it first. Every single time I stamp it, I usually stamp it first. Let's take and put this, see how we do. The "Yours" just a little bit messed up. Let's see if I can get that better. That's why it's nice to have a strip. I'm going to close this before I put my finger or my sentiment inside of it. I am going to put a little tapered end on each side. And then I'm going to glue this down onto my evening evergreen. Just centering top and bottom. I'm not worried about the sides because I am going to use my snips, guesstimate the amount of space and the angle, and trim off my mat. So here we are. I will put that on dimensionals, and with one in the end to give it support, or one in the center. Be sure you throw those little dimensional backs in the garbage because they get everywhere. And I am going to put this on my card. I think we're going to go right there. And our front card, the front of our card is done, but we need a pretty inside. So I have got a piece of basic white, 4 by 5 1/4 inches, or 10 by 14.4 centimeters. And don't worry, I'm going to put that in the video description. I have a sentiment from the same stamp set, Stay Wonderful. But before I put that down, using my silicone mat, just in case any gets off the side, this is just a little piece of cut off designer series paper. When I was cutting down my 4 inch by 6 inch piece of designer series paper, because I follow the Love It Chop It method. Usually when I get my designer series paper, I cut card fronts out of it. So I cut it at 6 one way, and then I do 4 inches, and I have card front size. And so sometimes when I make the card front a little smaller, I've got a cutoff edge, which in this case was very handy because I can use it to decorate my card. Okay, Stay Wonderful. That was, I didn't stamp that first like I usually do, so that made me a little nervous. And here is our little bee, and I didn't do the bee in green, I did him in black. And I brought in another, let's see, scratch paper. This is just printer paper. Let's just stamp him down, make sure he looks okay. He looks good. put my little bee on. All right, setting this aside. I also brought in my Daffodil Delight blends, and I grabbed the dark one. And I told you earlier about the color lifter. This is what it looks like. It just looks white. I am going to take the small end, the pen end, because again, it's a smaller area, and I'm just going to color in my bumblebee in yellow, and his little head in yellow, and his body in yellow, because there's some black on there, and I think that's enough to be the black and white bumblebee look. And his wings needed a little something. So I painted them and colored them in with my Wink of Stella. So they're sparkly and look translucent. There we are. It's all done. Let's put our seal on the edges. Pick it up and put that in our card. And we have a finished card. We have a pretty, let's move that, a pretty outside. We have a pretty inside. And our envelope is also lovely. There we are. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be making one. And until we meet again, happy crafting.